Hey, Blue Collar Millionaires. We got Scott Hanis here today, special guest on a special day. He is everything H&R, human resources, hiring. He's helped a lot of blue collar companies scale, getting A players. He's going to come on today, tell us a story about how he does that, how he went from a W-2, started his own company, and how he's been able to help a lot of companies similar to the ones you guys have. Scott, thanks for coming on.
No, thank you very much, Kevin and Chris. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure and honor to be here.
Tell us about your background, Scott, what you did before you started your own business.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I own a company called Fortitude HR Solutions. We're based out of Cleveland, Ohio. As Kevin mentioned, we work with a lot of companies throughout the United States doing recruiting, direct hire recruiting for, anything from an executive assistant to a CEO or COO. And then we also do HR consulting work. I've got a lot of people that tell me it's more business consulting than HR consulting, but
I agree with that.
Yeah, putting like the right structure, foundation in place. I mean, if you don't have a good foundation, typically like with a house, what happens usually crumbles. So putting in like core values, understanding roles, responsibilities, what does your org chart look like now? What should it look like in the future? Getting into performance management, how do you identify like goals and objectives so they're cascaded from the top down so that people have a roadmap for success. And then we do a lot with leadership training and coaching and just, trying to keep the executives of organizations kind of accountable for the results and making sure that, they're driving their team and leading their team the right way. I mean, there's always different approaches to get to the common goal that everybody wants to achieve, which is growth typically in a business. But at the end of the day, like you got to know your people, you got to know your team. If you don't know your people and you don't know your team, I think you need to look in the mirror as a leader and figure that out first. So I started the company back in June of 2019. So we've been running for a little over 3 years. We ourselves are growing. We have, again, on the recruiting side, we have a person that runs the recruiting division along with 4 other recruiters. And then on the consulting side, it's primarily just me. We do have somebody that helps from like an HR generalist standpoint, but we'll probably be adding an HR consultant here in Q1 of 2023. So yeah, that's what we do. I've been in HR for 17 years. I absolutely love human resources. It's all about helping people, helping organizations grow. A little bit about my background. I feel like I'm monopolizing the discussion here.
No, we want you to.
All right, perfect. So a little bit about my background. So I've worked for a lot of organizations. I worked for a private equity firm before I started this company. And we would go in and evaluate organizations, do due diligence, and then obviously make offers on organizations. So prior to joining and starting Fortitude HR Solutions, I worked at an underperforming asset is what we would call them. And just where there was, again, no structure, no foundation. Again, we had 1,100 employees and we had no job descriptions. I mean, so to me, you can probably picture that's like just total chaos. Nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing. There's no like defined role or responsibility. You're not staying in your lane and it's just chaos every day. So putting a lot of that structure in place, looking at, again, goals and objectives. I had an opportunity to put in performance management system. We changed payroll vendors. I got to work on the benefit side of things. But then like I like building and growing high performing teams. So being a part of the acquisition strategy of bringing in A players to the organization and allowing us to grow the business, from what we were doing before I started to where we were at before I left. And then prior to that, I worked for an international organization called Amtech Tech4. And I did HR stuff in Germany, London, India, Brazil, and Mexico, as well as the United States. And I was part of the mergers and acquisitions team. And I know you guys talk a lot about that with Blue Collar Millionaire, about looking at evaluating and buying businesses. So like I led all the due diligence from the HR side. Prior to me doing that, they would hire like Ernst & Young or Grant Thornton, and they'd pay them, a couple $100,000 to lead due diligence. So I usually will go in and I'd have 450 questions I would ask, and we'd open up a data room and we'd go through the financials and all the legal potential risks and look at their employment agreements and interview the key team members and find out who do we want to keep? Do we want to do a change of control bonus? Do we want to do retention stuff? How do we, take an organization and assimilate it to our culture and try to, do that change management, transition management process? So I had a lot of experience doing that and then working with different cultures, different people with different backgrounds. And I really enjoy doing that. I get to learn from other people, how they like to work, how they like to communicate. What we do in the US isn't always the right way. So understanding how people in India, Germany London, Mexico, and Brazil, how they like to work. And so that was a lot of fun. And so I've been very blessed and fortunate to have kind of the growth progression in my HR career, where I started as a HR manager, went to a director of HR role, and then I took a VP of HR role when I was with the private equity firm. And then I said, you know what, it's time to start doing this with other people that are like-minded, that want to grow their businesses, just versus working for a private equity firm where it's all about the numbers. You lose some of that personal touch when you work with the PE firms. And I can tell you a quick story about that. We had a tornado literally a quarter mile from one of our facilities. The entire executive team were in this meeting, and my boss is like, no, we're not going to like sound the alarm and have everybody go to the safe tornado shelters. And so I got up out of the meeting and said, Jim, I'm going to respectfully get out of here. I'm going to go check on our people. And so and safety was our number one core value. So you can't say safety is your core value and then let everybody work in a tornado, right? It just doesn't make sense. So that's when I knew it was time to say bye to the private equity firm. And so, I think you both know Tim Bratz. Tim's a neighbor of mine here in Cleveland, Ohio. And Tim and my wife really encouraged me to kind of take the leap of faith, going from making this large amount of money with the private equity firm to nothing overnight and starting Fortitude HR Solutions. But I can't be more thankful and blessed and just grateful for the opportunity to start my own company, but also to hire additional people that are a part of our team that I'm responsible for their families. That's the way I look at it. So making sure that I give back to them and I grow them and they can see our path for success and growth. And I want them to be a part of that journey. And we're going to make sure we take care of them. But I also get to help a lot of clients. Chris, you and I worked together last year before I got sick. And so working with you and Christy, I mean, Chris and Christy are great people. And I've gotten to know Kevin through the Legacy Family Mastermind prior. So again, really appreciate the opportunity to be on today and share a little bit about what we do.
Man, so I would love for you to kind of talk about, because there's a lot of W-2 people that are in this group looking to acquire their first business. Thankfully, they're looking at acquisitions instead of startup because they've seen the light, which a lot of us that did our startups didn't see the light because we didn't know what it looked like. But, there's a lot of things that you learn and get built in you when you start up your own business. So can you kind of talk about what are the things that has allowed you to be successful in your HR solutions, moving from your W-2 to having your own business? Because obviously you already knew how to take a business that was struggling and to rework it so that it was actually a sellable asset. So just kind of tell us what that looked like and what you think was allowing you to have the success you've had. Because I know some of your clients and they're extremely successful because of the information you bring to them.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, to me, it starts with your relationships. It starts with, again, people that are watching Blue Collar Millionaire that are part of your, this group, and the posts and the value that Kevin and Chris, you share with your members. I mean, that's awesome. I think you have to continually always look, how am I getting better each day? That continuous improvement mindset and kind of taking 1% approach. I think the relationships that you build obviously are just super, valuable for your growth of your organization, whether you buy an established business or you start a business from ground zero. And then I think, again, like honing your craft and what value you bring, like how are you being a service to other people? How are they seeing that value? I mean, that's going to translate to success. And then following up on the services that you provide, providing good customer service. I know that Kevin, as well as you, Chris, you're both in service-based businesses. I mean, service is kind of a lost art these days. Like, following up within 24 hours, being courteous, answering the phone, responding to an email. Like the ones that do that, those are the successful ones. I mean, it's not rocket science. A lot of it's common sense. Like treat people with respect and dignity, say please and thank you, show your appreciation, like do the little things. I think that's what's going to separate you from all the other businesses that are out there. And as you're analyzing and figuring out, do I buy company A versus company B or versus company C? It's just like you both are involved in real estate. Do your due diligence. Just like same thing when you buy a business or start a business. Know who your competitors are. Understand who your team members are. Understand like which ones are the ones that if you lose them as part of your team, you're going to lose value in the business. understand, again, what are your growth markets? What are the competitors doing? What can I, take that they might be doing, and how can I add further value to it? Do I need to increase my pricing? Do I need to look at a different market opportunity? I'm big on doing like SWOT analysis, which are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, looking at my business internally or the business that I might acquire, but then also looking at like my 3 closest competitors. Not saying that the other 4, 5, 6 competitors aren't important, but I want to look at the 3 that are closest to what I do. And then I want to figure out, can I take market share from them? Can I do another service that maybe we're not doing? Can I build out my organization and do more vertical integration of services? Or do I need to go out and acquire another company? So, I mean, there's all kinds of things I think you have to look at. To me, and then I think I want to know, again, what's the reputation of the company? How do they treat their employees or their team members? Because if they don't have a good, solid foundation for those things, you can implement all that, but that's going to take time. And it's going to take the trust of those team members to trust you, who's the new owner. So like the change management and the transition management of acquiring a business is so critical. And like we were bought out by a company called Amtech, and they had a couple thousand employees in India. And they went from that to roughly 16,000 employees in less than a year and a half. Wow. Through 6 large acquisitions. And they did a lot of things right. But again, as an HR person, I would have done things differently. And so that change management portion is so critical, I think, to keeping people that are really good on the team. Because let's say you lost your VP of sales that generated for you $100 million in revenue, and they left and went to go work for a competitor, or they got out of the business altogether. Now you've lost that key potential person that maybe some of your big suppliers or customers or clients worked with. So now your valuation of revenue, let's say you were doing 150 million in revenue now, and they lost the person that brought in 100 million in revenue. You just dropped it by a third, right? Yeah. So your business is no longer as valuable. Now there might be people internally that you can promote from within that have relationships with them, but there's a greater chance that once that person leaves, that business is going to one of your competitors. So you have to really understand and dive in and, again, know your people, know your team, know their strengths, know the areas where they need to improve. Like I'm a huge proponent of, and Chris, we've talked about this, like daily huddle meetings, weekly leadership meetings, but then do a one-on-one meeting. If you don't want to do it every week, that's fine, but at least minimum once a month. Get to know your people, understand, like when I worked in Brazil and Mexico, like they don't always want to work with people that come in from the United States. So I had to really say, okay, I'm going to get to know my team. So I'd go down there, like in Brazil, the first meeting I had with Paulo, who was my HR manager down there. I'm like, all right, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about your family. What do you like to do for fun? We talked about soccer, or they call it football down there. And like, I found out he liked the Corinthians team, which was a soccer football team. And so like, we talked about that. And then after I built that relationship, I said, hey, can you talk me to everybody else on the HR team? I want to get to know them. And then we went out on the shop floor. And I really got to earn their trust. Like trust isn't given, you have to earn it, right? And so I earned their trust, and I asked them about what the workers were doing on the shop floor. And then we had a meal together. And then after all of that, after the full day of getting to know the team, then we got into, okay, this is what we need to accomplish over the next 4 days that I'm here in Brazil. And we went through boom, 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 and we divided and conquered it. And we got everything done in 4 days. My boss, the president, and the director of finance, they still weren't done after a week. We had to stay an extra week because of that. So again, but I did research on how do you work with people, like when you go into Brazil and what's important to them. And I asked them, okay, what more do you need from me? So again, it's the same kind of concept with your employees or team members here, asking them, tell them what they're doing well. Tell them where you see them that they need to improve. Ask them, what do you need from me as your leader? What's missing? What tools, resources are there? But then getting into, this is where I see you going, throughout the rest of this year. Where do you want to be in the next couple of years? Like always having conversations to really build up that relationship. That's where you're going to run through the brick wall with other people. If you haven't read Simon Sinek or listened to Simon Sinek, he's a great leadership author. So is John Maxwell. So is Ken Blanchard. But I've been really digging Simon Sinek. I listened to a bunch of his podcasts and a couple of his books when I've been on the treadmill the last couple of weeks. And one of the books I listened to recently was like Leaders Eat Last. And that whole concept about like how there's all this danger in the workplace. And if an employee or a team member doesn't feel safe in their work environment, they're not going to perform at a high level, right? They're always going to be worried. Is their boss going to yell at them? Are they going to, potentially get fired? Is there going to be a layoff if we don't hit these numbers? And he talked a lot, which I really thought was really interesting. Like everybody wants to talk about, I want to be innovative and I want to do this and I want to do that. but then they want the numbers. But if you're innovative, like you're going to try and fail, and eventually you succeed. And that's where you really see the growth. But you have to be willing to give people the ability and the autonomy to try and fail and to go through that training. And you have to be willing to, allow mistakes to happen in your organization versus being so emotionally driven where you just fire the person because they didn't hit their target the 1 month. It's like, no, take a step back. Is there something going on in their lives personally? Can I help them out? Number one. But then number two, have I given them all the resources and tools to be successful? If I haven't done that, I need to look in the mirror and say, you know what? Like, I suck. I need to do better. Right. And so in order to do those things, like when you have that rhythm, right, and that discipline of the weekly team meeting, the daily huddle meeting, and then doing the one-on-one meetings with your team, it's going to allow you to build those relationships. So Chris or Kevin, if you go to one of your team members and say, hey, we just got a last minute job. I know it's 4:00 on a Friday. Would you be willing to help out and get this job done? And I'll even help you, kind of thing. That person's probably going to say yes, versus it's, you treat them like a number and you don't treat them like a human being. That's what, HR people, they need to remember there's a human being there. That's why it's called human resources. It's not called personnel anymore. And I don't know if you guys read a lot of these studies, but there's a lot of new studies like these people that are taking like CEO roles in these big corporations. They're pulling a lot of people from the HR function to be now people leaders, but then also to be CEOs of companies. So it's really interesting. I read articles all the time from SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management. And there's all kinds of new studies and things that are out there. In fact, the GM CEO, they were in HR for a portion of their career. So understanding, again, people and process. And it makes sense. Like, again, when you're a leader, you influence people, and when you have a company, you're not leading a company, you're running a company. You're leading people, right? So, and when there's people, there's always going to be emotions involved. So you gotta be able to handle that. You got to be able to know how to deal with people. You need to know how to conflict, resolve issues. You need to know how to problem solve, and you need to have emotional intelligence. You need to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And you need to know where I can take a self-reflection day and be like, all right, this is what I've done really well, and this is what I need to improve upon. And I'm going off on a tangent. I'm sorry, both of you.
No, there's a lot of things I want to talk about. One thing, but I love the acronym SWAT. That had me ready to go to war because I just did like a 60-minute SWAT conversation with, I won't say who, but I might be buying into their company. They're a good friend, a blue collar millionaire. But what they got from me is like I was giving them a different perspective because I'm seeing some problems, and I was kind of talking to them about their threats, opportunities, and stuff. And sometimes you need an outside person to come in to do it. You're only as smart, and you can only have the ideas that you have in your head all the time. You bring in somebody like Scott to do a SWOT analysis, you're going to get all kinds of value. You're going to start thinking about stuff. That's what happened. But one thing I wanted to touch on, Scott, because you said something, and it's kind of near and dear to me, is the talking to where's the line on employees of like their personal lives and everything. And I'll just give you a quick thing. I've had a ton of employees. You can imagine in the gutter, roof, lawn business, you got a lot of people with some problems in their life. And this is going to sound crazy, you guys. I made a spreadsheet one day and I wrote down every employee I could remember ever having. We're talking about like, I was up way over 100. And then I was like looking at which ones had kind of lives that were like put together. They had licenses, they had assuming good credit. They lived in nicer areas. They didn't have a bunch of kids with different people. It seemed like all those people were really good employees to me. And the ones that had all the problems, who were bugging me about every little thing, they never worked out. I know you can't go out and ask those questions and say, but how do you deal with people who bring a lot of their personal problems? And if they have a lot of personal problems, they're not going to really do a good job during the day. How much do you get involved in that? It's a hassle.
So I will tell you, I think every organization's different. I'll start with that. I think every leader or person that's in a leadership role is different. My philosophy has always been, I always have an open door. And sometimes it gets very emotional, even for me. Like when I was in the corporate world, again, I had 1,200 employees at the last company I worked at. And like people could come in and talk to me at any time. And so like I had people come in and tell me stories about, cancer and different issues that they were having maritally. And like, I don't care what anybody says, that affects your performance in the workplace, right?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Everybody always says, leave it at the door. But guess what? Again, we're people, right? So I would always say, you know what, come talk to me. I'd listen to them. I'd cry with them sometimes. I'm a faith-filled guy. This is a big taboo, no thing to do. But I'd be like, all right, is it okay if I pray with you? You know, like, and that gets you in trouble a little bit. So I always said, is it okay? I always ask permission. And if they said no, I said, that's okay. I respect that. I'll just keep you in my thoughts. But I wanted to listen, and I wanted to find out what's going on. You know, companies, you can offer what's called an EAP, an employee assistance program, where they can talk to a counselor and maybe get some things under control. If it's, you know, maybe it's a mental issue, if it's financial, like companies, you don't have to spend a ton of money on it, but get a financial wellness consultant to come in and talk to your people once a quarter. A lot of people, I think, you know, in the skilled trades, especially, like they may not always be the best at managing money. There's people that are in white collar positions that are not good at managing money either, right? But again, having that education, because maybe they weren't taught that growing up. Maybe they didn't have parents that like cared about it. Maybe their parents struggled with it. So being somebody that can have an influence and impact on other people, that's always something I tried to do. So I always tried to give and give and give at sometimes the expense of my family time, or just my own like mental sanity. And I remember like I had an employee who like had a lot of mental issues and had a gun in his mouth the night before. And he came in and talked to me, and we talked about it. And he agreed to let me call the EAP, and we got him some help. And he went into like an outpatient therapy like thing in order to get some additional help. And like, I don't feel like I saved the person's life, but he's like, Scotty, because you taking time and showing that you cared, that helped save my life. Like he wanted to live because he didn't think anybody cared. And so like, and some of this, I think I bring, because I am a faith-filled person. I volunteer, I do youth ministry. I work with kids in grades 9 through 12 in high school. And it's a lot different being in high school now than it was when I was in high school 25 years ago.
Yeah.
There's so much more peer pressure and social media and all this other garbage. And, you know, maybe there's broken families and all this stuff. But again, being somebody that cares and like asking people generally how their day is going, like just taking the time. And again, like with 1,200 people, I can't do that with 1,200 people, right? But we can create a culture that we're going to ask our people, how are they doing today, and really genuinely care. And if they do something well, we're going to show appreciation and we're going to affirm them, because that little thing may go a really long way with somebody who's got some self-esteem issues or some mental issues that they're dealing with. So again, to your point, Kevin, you really can't ask about that during the interview process, but there's nothing wrong with bringing somebody in that's saying, you know what, like, hey, you know, Joe, looks like you're having a rough day. Like you want to talk about it. Like something's bothering you, I can tell. And if you want to talk about it, my office is always open, you know, not that you're forcing them, but you're inviting them in. Like there's a big difference between inviting someone to talk to you versus saying, Joe, come talk to me. Right. And so I think understanding that, and then training your other leaders, right, whether it's a manager or a supervisor or another executive on your team, to look out for little things. Like you're going to see patterns. If you work with Joe every day for 6 months, you're going to know what Joe's personality is and how things are going. And if something's off, hopefully that manager or supervisor is coming to somebody in HR, if you have a big enough structure, and saying something, or going to one of the owners or whoever that person Joe's closest to have those types of conversations. And you're going to see stuff like, again, people say don't do this, but people post stuff like on social media all the time. And like I would always tell like our leaders, like don't friend people like that you work with, but they would. And that's totally fine. But sometimes we would find some really good things that someone just lost a family member, right? And we didn't know about it. And the employee was too proud to talk about it. And that's okay. But I would pull them aside, or I'd go out on the shop floor and I'd talk to them, or I'd say, hey, like I'd call up another one of their managers or supervisors and say, hey, I just learned that, you know, so-and-so had a death in the family. Why don't you just see how they're doing, check in on them. And if they need additional help, have them come see me in my office, kind of thing. So it's a fine line, Kevin, to answer your question very directly.
That was really good. I got a couple things, because most of these guys are small companies in here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I am as well. What are like some levers that you can do legally, that you can ask for to kind of maybe put you in a better position to not hire the wrong person? So an example is, I know that bigger companies run credit checks. I don't know if that's legal in every state, but I understand why they do it, because somebody who's a disaster with their credit probably going to not do as good a job as somebody who was. I found personally, when people are on garnishments with child support, especially multiple children, they never work out as good employees. It's like every time it's a problem. And that's just logical. I know you can't really ask that, but if somebody doesn't take care of their kids, you think they're going
Right.
to care about your gutter cleaning? Not really.
Right.
And then, of course, lots of people do background checks. To me, I wouldn't want to hire anybody who did violent stuff or anything, but I definitely hired people who had marijuana. I hired somebody who went to jail for 4 years for marijuana. He was a great employee. I mean, because I already knew him from playing basketball. I was like, this guy went to jail for 4 years for that. If he assaulted somebody or stabbed them, different story, you know.
Yeah, and I think
what can you do? What can you ask for legally? What can you do to kind of like say, hey, maybe this takes some of those people out of the pool?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with your interviewing process, right? Like, hopefully, everybody that's watching or listening or watching the recording, you have some type of interview process, right? To me, like, again, you should do the basic things. You should have a job description that defines the role and responsibilities. Hopefully, you're getting candidates to apply that are going to give you a resume, and they're going to talk about the experience they have. And I first thought the first step you should be doing is reviewing the resume versus the job description. Are they qualified to do the job, or do they have some tangible skills that would transfer over that they could do the job? I mean, people will talk about like education requirements. That's not always the most important thing for me, right? Like, I don't really care about that. I care more about, like during the interview process, like I'll talk about like what's important to us. And I set the expectation that, hey, we're going to show up to work every day on time. We're going to do this. This is how we treat our customers, those kind of things. And I tell them about what the company's all about, what our values are. I ask them how they live out those values in the workplace. And then, like, for attendance, for example, like, this is something that we don't tolerate. And you can tell in the interview process, right? Especially if you're doing an in-person interview, you can read body language, right? And I've interviewed a couple thousand people in my career. Usually when people's eyes are going to the left or the right and they're not looking at you when they're answering a question, they may be full of crap, right? Or if the arms are crossed like this, they're not open to hearing. Like, there's a lot of nonverbal communication things you can pick up on. The other thing I would say is, like, if you're concerned about a certain area of their background, ask them about it, right? If they freely have told you something in the interview, say, okay, well, I have a follow-up question to that, right? Or you can tell them, like, even before we would do interviews, I would always tell people we do pre-employment background check and drug screen, right? That way it's going to weed out some of the people that might be, have assault or those kind of things. I will tell you, like, there's a haunted house company that's near Cleveland, Ohio. They didn't do background checks consistently. They would do it on certain people. And that's a discriminatory hiring practice. You can't do that. If you do it for one, you got to do it for all. Well, they skipped this one person because they fit a certain profile, they said, right? So they didn't do the background check. Here they find out that the person was a child sex offender, right? Wow. And so it caused all kinds of issues. If they would have followed a process, done the background check, it wouldn't have been an issue. Now, again, people have different theories on drugs, marijuana, whatever. Like, I don't care what you do. It's your life, right? But if they're going to a customer's home, if they're going to be driving a vehicle that I own and they're on my insurance, I'm going to care. I'm sorry, right? Even if you want to do marijuana, that's your legal right. But federally, it's still illegal. And there's no DOT test like there is for alcohol. So that's just the only thing I'll say about that. But I think there's little things like that you can pick up on. But I think a lot of it starts with us. Like, when you're interviewing somebody, it's a sales process, essentially. Like, when you do recruiting, it's a sales process. Why does somebody want to come join your team? And then when you're doing the interviews, if you have more than one person on your team, which hopefully as you build, you do, get other people on the team to interview. Do a consensus, like, group thing to figure out, what did you see? What did you see? Like, can we see ourselves working with this person? I would go through that. Some people, like, and this is a good tactic you can do too, instead of just doing one interview and be like, all right, I'm going to hire you, take them out to lunch, and then at the lunch, get there a little bit before the candidate gets there and be like, hey, like, waiter, waitress, whoever, server, please screw up their order. Bring out their food like 5 minutes later than mine, and let me see how they react. Like, if they're a total jerk to the waiter or waitress or server,
I like that.
I'm gonna have a little bit of a pause. You know what I mean? So, like, there's some things like that I think we can do. You can see people in their elements too. Like, when I used to work so I had a couple locations that were outside of Ohio. When I was at the PE firm, we had a location down in Florida, and I would go to a couple restaurants, and if they had like amazing personalities and knew how to communicate and they can multitask 5-6 tables, I'm like, hey, like, do you really like working here? And they'd be like, oh, not really, but it pays the bills. I'm like, have you ever thought about being in customer service? Well, yeah, but maybe, but I don't know if I have the right skill set. I'm like, why don't you come interview with us? We offer a full-time job. This is what the hourly rate would be to start. We offer full benefits, and people would be really intrigued. And I hired 3 or 4 people that way down at the Florida location just based upon seeing somebody in action doing what they do. So like you can get real creative. You can find stuff out. You can ask for references. I'm not a huge reference fan anymore, Chris and Kevin, because if you go to Billy and say, Billy, I need to see 3 of your references, they're not giving you 3 people that they think are horrible, that they think Billy's horrible. They're only going to give you the good people, right? So, but people will do like, social media checks. They'll do like what you said, Kevin, like in the background check, you can do a motor vehicle report check. You can do an education credential check. You can do a credit check, but there's always like a release and authorization. If you don't have a good background check company, I like clearchecks.com. Relatively easy to use. It's all internet based. You can do the background check and the drug screen through them. So there's those things that you can do. The other thing that we used to do, and we went to do like merger and acquisition tours to look at potential properties, we would go into a local watering hole and be like, all right, tell us about what you know about this company. Especially if it was a couple miles from the plant, like, do you get people that come here? What do you know about the company? What do you know about the culture? That was like really secretive, like fact-finding due diligence from us. And we would ask multiple people. It wouldn't be just the people that worked at the watering hole. We'd ask people that maybe that were customers. I don't have a problem talking to anybody. Clearly, you can hear me talking a lot. So with that, like just trying to build relationships and find out what we could. Again, but taking it with a grain of salt, because there's always 3 sides to a story, right? There's person A, person B, somewhere in the middle is the truth. And it's our job as leaders or business owners to identify what the facts are and then make decisions based upon the facts.
Scott, I heard a couple of different, I'm always trying to level my skill set up as a recruiter for the company, because it's such an essential part of the process of a company scaling and also being able to just provide quality service. And I kind of caught where 2 of these individuals that have been very successful in business, they said they will put a recruiting ad out and then set up a particular day where everybody comes in, and they will do like a group setting type of recruitment situation. Mm-hmm. And like one of the questions was, if you were a type of car, what kind of car would you be? And they were asking different questions to try to get a sense of their personality. Mm-hmm. And then they would take analysis on what those answers were, and then they would invite those individuals back that they felt like would be a good candidate for a one-on-one interview. One of the things they talked about was beneficial is it also allowed them to it's kind of like what Mark says, Kevin, it gets a one-to-many. So you're not individually doing 30 interviews. You can sift out a lot of the mess by having that interaction with a group setting, and then you can start applying your time as the one-to-one. What's your thought process on some type of group setting like that?
So I'm gonna be the other side, because you're gonna have people that are introverted, right? That don't like group settings. So like, again, everybody's different. So I mean, it's a pain because recruiting takes a lot of time, right? And you should always be recruiting. Like you hear, always be selling, always be closing. So you should always be recruiting. You should put people in your pipeline and hopefully tell them, hey, we don't have anything right now, but as soon as we do, we want to reach back out to you. I like the concept. The problem is the execution, because everybody's different, right? And so to me, I'd rather take 15, 20 minutes, half hour, talk to that person, find out really a little bit more about them. They might be nervous, even talking one-on-one. Some people just don't interview well. It's like test taking in school. Like I was never a great test taker for like the Iowas or the standard test. I don't like that. But you put me in front of a room, I know what I'm talking about. I know my core competencies. I did well in school. I just didn't do well in taking tests. So again, not a bad thing. I just think that sometimes you're going to eliminate candidates that might be like rock stars because they don't thrive in a group setting. So that's my only caveat. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's even like the video interviews. Like people will do video interviews, or they'll do, before we talk, I want you to send me a paragraph about why you're qualified. Like that's great and all, but again, you might be eliminating somebody that doesn't have a ton of time to write a paragraph. And not that that's a bad thing, because maybe that's what you want. But the same thing with the video interview. You might do a video interview and you might see the person's an older white male, and you don't want to hire older white males, right? So then you're discriminatory in your hiring process, and you can't do that either. So it's kind of a fine line. Like to me, it takes time to like figure out your craft of how you're going to interview and how you're going to hire people. And again, like even if you have the wrong person in the wrong seat, that's okay. Like there might be something else that you can do. But again, like I always look at, Like, what are the strengths that the person does have? And then do we have a role that we can fit them in versus just saying, okay, I'm going to cut bait with everybody, because turnover is very expensive. We've talked about this, Chris, before. Like, it could be anywhere from 1 to 2 times what you pay somebody, right? Whether you have hard costs with recruiting and lost productivity, or it could be, the training costs. But then there's the whole like morale and like, was that person really liked? Like those are things that you can't always quantify. And so understanding that and looking at, the organization as a whole, and again, where do we want to grow to, and how do we want to continue to, attract talent? That's also going to be, like we talked about before, Chris, doing like a Facebook Live and telling everybody what you're doing. Like, Chris, you got some amazing things going on at Absolute, and I'd be talking about that. And like you and I talked last Thursday when you were on the legacy call about, like the growth pattern for employees. Like, when you come in, you do this, you learn this, then you can move to this level, and then you can learn these things and you can move to this level. Like, people want opportunities to grow, right? If the company wants to grow, they want to grow with the company, but then they want their pay to increase as well. Like, this is an extremely tough labor market. I've never seen so many ghosting interviews and just lack of like common courtesy and respect. But sometimes I think people do that because it's not reciprocated from the company either. Like, it's not uncommon for a company to interview somebody, but then never to call that person, email them, text them and say, you know what, you didn't get the job. So they just think it's okay. It's kind of that like quid pro quo thing. So since somebody does it, I can do it as well, versus being a person of integrity, or a person that's got, common decency and respect, and saying, you know what, Chris, I've taken another job. Thank you for the interview. If something changes in the future, I'll reach back out, but I'm not going to proceed in the interview process. That goes a long way versus, Chris, you're supposed to meet with Bob, and Bob or Sally, they ghost you today. Like, that's going to make you never want to talk to Bob or Sally again. So again,
that's funny, Scott. If somebody sent me that message or told me that, I'd probably make a mental note for sure and a mark off that if this person comes back to me, I will definitely talk to them, because it'd be so rare they do ghost you. Quick thing on the references, just something that works for me. It's going to be different for bigger companies, but I totally agree. Putting your 3 friends and your mother's, your mom or somebody doesn't mean anything to me. Right. But what I do is I always ask, I look at their thing and I want to see any breaks in the their work history. And I always ask them what's going on with that. And then I say, who's the last 3 people that gave you a paycheck? Who's the owner? Who's the guy who knows? And then I call them up. They don't want you calling them up sometimes. I say, hey, that's who I want. I ask for my own references. That's what I need to know. I want to see what your history was like that. A lot of times they'll ghost you after that because they know what's going to happen. Right. But when I talk to those owners, a lot of them I know, because I used to get references for people I didn't think really were great who worked for me. I don't want to kill them. I know they have a kid. So I just like, yeah, he did a good job. He's solid. But I didn't feel great getting off the phone. So now I ask those business owners, I say, hey, this is between you and I. I'm never going to talk to this person about our phone call. Just real quick, I'm an entrepreneur just like you, trying to make money for my family. Would you hire this guy again? And a lot of times they'll say no. Yeah. They'll tell you, really? And that's all I want to know. And I do that for other entrepreneurs now. I say, don't hire this guy. Just between you and me, he did not do well with me.
Yeah, and so you got to be a little careful with that, because like a lot of times, like big corporations will tell you, like if you worked for like the 1,200 person company I came from before I started the company, we were only allowed to give dates of employment and job title when somebody called for reference checks. Because if you say something that could be damaging to their ability to get the job or credibility or their character, like it could be defamation, it could be other legal issues. So you just got to be careful with that. Again, most people don't realize that. But I mean, that stuff happens. And again, if you are going to get references, I would say 3 professional references, people that you reported to, like that way, you probably will get some type of meaning. And normally I ask for their permission to call those references. Usually, like in the big corporation, we'd have them sign something, but I stopped doing reference checks probably 7-8 years ago, just because nobody ever gave a bad reference. Once in a while you'd get somebody, but I mean, not often. Yeah.
Where are you finding the most success right now for these blue collar recruitments? Like what platform, what avenue? I know you said always be recruiting. I'm definitely a big fan of when you're seeing them in the field, in action, and you say, I could use that personality, character, work ethic. Let's see if they're interested in moving careers. But outside of that, where else?
Yeah, I think it's a combination answer, Chris. I don't think there's any one particular source or site. I mean, Indeed, I think probably the best one out there. One of these days, I'm going to build something to compete against Indeed because I don't like them. I spend a lot of money with them every month. Um, LinkedIn's a good one for like white collar professional roles, but then I think Facebook, you can do job postings through Facebook. That's not a bad one. I think a lot of it, like if you have employees, ask for referrals from your own team members and
Yeah.
pay them. Maybe give them $100 if they make it 30 days. If they make it 90 days, give them $400. That way, again, they're going to be more invested and they might be more a person that can hold that new hire accountable because they don't want that person's reputation to be on the line because, hey, Joe referred Sally and Sally didn't come to work or vice versa. So that could be something. I like the idea of like, again, in like blue collar world. So like I help a flooring company that's here in Cleveland, Ohio, and they went from a couple $1 million and they almost doubled their growth in a year. Right. And so with that, like we'll go and we'll look at other people, other competitors in the area, try to pull people from there. Or again, if it's more of a like a landscape company, for example, if I'm driving around and I see Sally's landscape company and Joe's landscape company truck, I may go talk to them and say, hey, like, do you like what you're doing? How long you been here? Like, what do you do for them? And then say, have you ever thought about making a career change? So like, again, some of it's like, it's boots on the ground work. And again, anytime you own a company, like you're going to wear multiple hats and you're going to do multiple things. And for anybody that says owning a company, you can do it in 4 hours a week. Again, eventually you can, but that's not happening right up front, right? Even when you buy a business that's established, same thing. Like you still need to have oversight and leadership, and you still need to, again, you need to be the visionary if that's your role. Everybody that's a leader is not a visionary. They might be better at operating or they may be better at finance or whatever that key strength is. If you don't know it, that's fine, but hire people that know it that can complement your skill set that you have. And then you have a good, well-rounded team that's diverse with different skill sets versus, like if you do personality assessments, that's another recruiting or hiring tool. And if everybody, Chris, we did this with your company, if everybody's a D and they're very dominant personality, all you're going to have is conflict every single day, right? Yeah. So you want to have a good mixture. You want people that are D's and I's and S's and C's, and they have different complementary, skill sets as well as personalities on the organization. So Kevin, that could be something you can do. I mean, there's predictive index, there's strength finders, there's 16 personalities, there's Myers-Briggs, there's DISC, there's Hogue, there's Burke. There's like 60 different ones that are out there. And to me, they're good, like indicators, but they're not gospel, right? Some people know how to manipulate and how to take a test. And if I tell you to take the test today, Kevin, can you take this by the end of the day today? You may have meetings till 5, and I'm expecting you to turn this test in by 6. You're going to answer it one way versus if I say, hey, Kevin, you got till Saturday to end of the day to take it. You may be relaxing on your couch or you're on your front patio. You're going to answer it a little bit differently.
I agree.
So the environment you put people in, again, it's our jobs, again, to put people in environments to succeed, not to fail.
Yeah. Talk about onboarding. That was something that I realized and I'm still trying to perfect it even more so. When we bring people in, we finally, feel like we've found the correct person. Mm-hmm. And then just that ability to set them up for success and make them feel wanted.
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, like, I love the idea. And again, not everybody can afford to do this, but when somebody walks in the door, like at your business, Chris, or yours, Kevin, or even my company, like I want to have shirts for them. If they're getting business cards, I want to have business cards. If they have a computer they're working on, like a laptop and a cell phone, I want all that to be there. I want to give them some type of welcome basket. Onboarding, I want them to go in and meet everybody on the team, spend a little bit of time with everybody on the team, get to know them, find out why they work there, how long they work there, what do they do for the company. Because again, like if you have somebody that's out in the field and they're going to call into the office occasionally, you want them to have a relationship versus just calling out of the blue. So I think that's important. And then like, it depends on the business, but understanding that role and responsibility, and again, setting them up for success. So, even if they're in an office position, go out in the field and see what the organization does. Go out and do some of the jobs maybe, or rotate through some of the different people in the field on the different services and the products that you offer. Understanding like your business software, I know Chris, you use House Call Pro, but whatever CRM or ERP business software you use, understanding some of that. Again, spending time as the owner with the person to like really go deep into the vision that you have for the business, as well as the culture and the values, like really get them assimilated into that, Chris, you do a great job. I see it on Facebook with, like your weekly trainings on Fridays, I think it is. You and Chris, you do with the leadership team, like doing those kind of things, like that all matters, right? And then further developing them. And then when you onboard them, again, get them into their role after a couple days or after a week, let them do their job and have someone with them, like a peer or a mentor. Maybe you have a buddy. Like we used to do buddy systems when I worked for one of the other organizations. And so they were never by themselves for the first 30 days. After the first 30 days, then we let them do more on their own. And then, they were there still to check in with them. And so like the buddy system, we would have like a daily meeting with the person. They didn't have to have lunch by themselves. If they were a new person and you worked in like an organization where there was a lunchroom, that can be really uncomfortable, because just like when you go to school for the first day, it's also similar when you go to, work for a company, like you may not know people. And so like making them feel welcomed and showing them appreciation and saying please and thank you, like all that stuff goes an extremely long way in the employee life cycle, but also the onboarding process. And then after 30 days, let's say, Sally, you did a really great job on these things, and this is what I think you can still improve upon. And this is what I see you accomplishing in the next 30 days. And then like having a good map for what that looks like. And then eventually you kind of set them free, and then you do your monthly one-on-one check-ins minimum. And then, hopefully they're able to do the role that you're expecting. So, but again, clear expectations, their goals, what you're looking for them. If you're managing them with key performance indicators, KPIs, like go over that stuff. If you have standard operating procedures documented and written out, have them review that. If you've got them written down, that's great. But I would record them with like Loom or Zoom or whatever technology you use, and let them really watch them as well. And then let them take some notes and questions. And then when they go to the field, they'll be able to ask additional questions, and things might pick up more rapidly for them. So like, and then if you're in, like, I'm thinking of the flooring company that I work with here in Cleveland, like they have a bunch of products that they offer. So understanding the products, meeting some of the sales reps for those products or those manufacturers, going to the warehouse, seeing what the warehouse does, going on site and doing like the install of, the flooring. I think all that stuff matters. I think sometimes too often we hire an employee and we throw them to the wolves, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens is a lot of times they're not set up for success. And then we wonder, why did we lose a bunch of people in the first 90 days? It's because we didn't spend the time to properly onboard them, train them. You're always going to have circumstances where the person wasn't a good fit. We probably shouldn't have hired them. They kind of pulled the wool over us, kind of, the saying, and that's going to happen. And I've hired a couple thousand people. And do we get it right all the time? The answer is no. Like, you're not going to always be right, but you can't be too hard on yourself either. Like, you have to look at, okay, when someone leaves, why did they leave? Is there something I could have done better, right? That's where that reflection piece comes in. And then apply that to the next time you hire somebody so that you don't do the same mistake you did prior.
That's good
Wow,
stuff,
that's
man.
good stuff. Yeah. The one thing that people make mistakes is on that they throw their employees to the wolves. I've done it. And it's part of that cause is owner hiring fatigue. When you have a lot of guys who there's turnover, I used to start doing like, this guy's going to be out of here in 3 weeks. So you don't want to put a lot of energy. And when I really made a change in like 2013, 14, I said, hey, my job is to make these guys successful. Mm-hmm. And I have to go in there with that thing. And I'm okay with talking to 5 guys, trying out 3, 4, 5 guys, and only one guy becomes like a stud. And when I switched that in my brain, all of a sudden I had much better people going. And then the last part of that is I wanted to see them do something like a barrier to entry. So back then it was maybe going to the unemployment office. I would ask them a bunch of questions on an email and see how they answered them. And some guys will just they don't even give any effort to do anything, especially on a lower level, like a gutter job. If they don't give effort to do that, they don't want to do a resume, they're not really going to do well with you. I remember maybe my best employee that I ever had. I mean, the guy wrote me like the super long email. He told me everything he thought about it. He was at the unemployment office. He even looked up my company and made comments. I wanted to meet this guy the next day. He ended up being a stellar employee, and now he owns a multi-million-dollar roofing business, and he follows his page.
And you had an impact on him, right? Like, that should be everybody's job that owns a business, is having impact on their people, because at the end of the day, we're responsible again for them and their families and all those things. And so the other thing that I wanted to say like in like the blue collar space, like find maybe a temporary staffing agency. That could be a way where you're going to pay more for that, right? Usually there's a markup. If you pay someone $10 an hour, you may have to pay $15 an hour for that person. But it's kind of like to try it before you buy it. Do they have the right attitude? Do they have the right skill set? So there's companies out there that you can partner with that do just staffing. And then you can tell them, again, you got to give them the job description. You still should interview them. You still shouldn't just let them just show up. But you don't have to put as much time in it, because if Sally comes to you day one and Sally's not performing, then by day two, Sally's gone, right? You're not investing a ton of time and resources. Now, some staffing companies won't work in like hazardous roles because there's higher workers' comp costs. Like I'm thinking of your business, Kevin, potentially.
They will not do it for mine.
Yeah. So, but again, there might be other industries in the blue collar millionaire that people are watching this that might be a good option. So it's a more of an investment to do it that way, but it should take some less time off of your hands as far as going through all the whole interviewing process, posting the jobs, finding the talent. It just might be another avenue for you. And then normally,
it's a great way to do it. Yeah, they don't do it in my industry, but when I had a landscaping business, I was using it, and I was getting good people. I was getting some good people. You could try them for 1 or 2 days. You don't like them, it's over.
Yeah, and there's day labor like staffing companies that are out there. The other thing, and normally like the end goal should be within 90 days you're hiring that person. So like we used to use temporary staffing agencies at some of the corporations in the lower level positions when we were hiring, and like we would hire them then at like $12 an hour. But if they got hired after 90 days, we were paying them $14 an hour, right? So we just took some of that extra money we were paying to the staffing agency and paid it to the employee. And then we went through, I'm big on like what Chris and I talked about last week, like with the career development. Like people don't want to make $12 the rest of their life, right? Nope. They want to have opportunities to make more money, grow. And again, if they're being challenged and they feel like they're part of the solution and they can grow, they're going to be that much more willing to do the same for your business. So having a good career path and development structure. So even if it's a landscape company, for example, maybe all they're doing is trimming. That's all they're doing initially. And then maybe they learn how to operate the grass cutting machines that are out there. So they're running the lawn mowers or the grass cutters, whatever you want to call them. And then eventually they're doing more like complicated things like irrigation walls, and they're putting in, like retaining walls and those kind of things, or they're doing mulching. So there's different levels. And then based upon those levels, obviously they have more value to the company. And then you can pay them more based upon the value that they bring to the company. So there's a lot of different ways you can structure things.
I had to do that. Go ahead, Kevin.
I did that with, I had 4 levels in my thing. And I would say, hey, you're at level 4. This is how you get to level 3, 2, and 1. This is what you can expect to get paid. This guy's a level 1. This guy's a level 2. You can see it. And some guys were really eager and hungry to move up quickly. And then some guys, they say they're going to do it, but then they're like, nah, I kind of like being a level 4 and not having zero responsibility. And then I needed level 4s too. But you have to, Scott, I said that on the message. This is so true. I made a mistake on this. You have to have an attractive opportunity for them. People care about themselves. They don't really care about your company. They say, is this a company I can grow with? Can I feed my family? Will I be able to buy a house if I work here? Where can I go? Who could I become in this company so I can get the life I want? If you can't give that opportunity to somebody, you can't expect to get A or even B players. You're gonna, if you're, hey, I'll pay you cash, $15 an hour on the side, you're gonna get the worst of the worst.
Agree.
People want benefits. They want a salary. They want to know they have work. They want to know maybe they have input. They want to know they can move up. If you can package all that, you're going to get much better employees, and it's going to save you a ton of time.
Here's a book touching base on what we're talking about at the moment that I read, and I think every business owner should read this, or operations manager, and it was called The Dream Manager by Matthew Kelly. Scott, have you read that?
Yep. Great book.
It was a great book. It's an easy read. I actually had it on Audible and just listened to it in my time, but it was about that concept. I mean, and it reminds me of what I forgot what guest we had on, Kevin, but somebody said, was talking about the customer experience and the employee experience. And I walked away with that because I was like, man, we focus so much on impressing our customers to bring in revenue, but without the team, we're not going to be able to scale that impression and scale that revenue. So why don't we focus on our team experience as well?
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a simple concept, but yet we overlook it so much. And money will always follow if we do enhance the customer experience and also enhance the team experience. And that's what that book was all about, is how can we help our team reach their dreams so that they buy into the vision. And this work is actually helping them accomplish their own personal dreams.
Well, and one of the things you can do, go to your team members and say, okay, well, like, tell me your big dream. Like, what do you want to have in the next year or the next 2 years?
Yep.
Print something out, make them a little vision board and put it at
Yeah.
their desk or put it in their work area or put it in their vehicle. Like, that's something cool. And then they know that there's an incentive there. And like what you just talked about, Chris, and that book talks about, like the internal versus the external customer. Like our internal customers are our employees, our team members, right?
Yeah,
if we don't take care of our team and we don't treat them with dignity, respect, and provide an opportunity for them to grow, learn, and be successful, then they're like, our organization is not going to reach its full potential, right? It's the same thing with our customers, the external customers, the people that we work with outside of the organization. So you have to do both. You can't just focus on one and not the other. And like what Kevin said, like, and this is a big thing with, unfortunately, a lot of smaller companies, is they don't offer benefits. So it's like, let's say you had 100 people that applied for one of your positions, right? And if you don't offer benefits like minimum medical insurance, paid time off, and paid holidays, you're going to take that 100 people and you're going to knock out 30 to 40% of them automatically, right? And then you're going to go through their interviews and you're going to find out you may have 10 candidates that are really good out of those 100 people, right? Because maybe their spouse has benefits, or maybe they're under the age of 26 and they can stay on a parent's plan. So then there's options, but you're limiting your pool by not offering some of the stuff that employees want. And again, if you want, let's say you tried to take somebody from a larger organization, they have all that stuff already: the medical, the dental, the vision, the retirement, paid time off. So then how are we going to attract that person to go from there to our company? And even if the pay is the same, they're still losing money. If you did like I used to do W-2 comp statements at the end of the year for all my employees or team members. So they may have gotten paid $50,000 with all their wages, but then when you add all the benefits up, the social costs, they made another 30%, right? Yeah. So they were making way more money. And when they saw it on paper, they're like, oh, that makes sense. So then it's not like I'm going to go run out the door and go work for a competitor that's going to pay me $55,000, but doesn't offer medical, dental, vision, retirement. They're not going to do it, right? So, but again, like that should be part of our goals as we set up our organizations, or if we buy into an organization.
Yeah, we
Go ahead.
We have my upper guys. They take a vehicle home. It's branded. I know I can trust them because they're my upper guys, reflecting our business in a branded vehicle on personal time. They don't take it out of state on, road trips or nothing, but it's there for them to run to the grocery store and whatnot. Then also some of my upper guys have cell phones. Mm-hmm. Then what we implemented this past year was we had group benefits, a group plan, but we didn't subsidize any of the cost at all until last year. We gave everybody $150 a month towards their benefits to help. So you don't have to cover every bit of the benefits, because that is extremely hard to do when you first start out, or until you get past, a million plus in revenue. And even still, it's difficult. But if you can just have a group plan, and then you can add a little bit each year as you grow towards that, where you help take some of that burden of expense off.
Absolutely. Well, and again, like what you just said, so if you offer group health insurance through your organization, you're not required to offer benefits until you get to 50 or more employees. That's then the Affordable Care Act comes into play. If you don't do it, there's some penalties that are there, or fines. But with that, you have to pay 50% of the employee-only premium. So if it's $500 a month, your responsibility as a business is $250 per employee per month. The challenge is, like, if you have a family, like if someone's got a family, they're married, they got kids, like that plan might be, instead of $500 a month, it's probably $1,500 a month. So that's where it's not as cost effective for the employee, right? Yeah. So that's part of the challenge. And then again, we talked about the employee assistance program, like an EAP. You can get that benefit relatively inexpensive. It's like $4 or $5 a month per employee you have on there. So that's a good benefit, because again, if they're having some family issues or financial issues or mental issues, they have somebody that they can go to. So it's a real benefit. Same thing with like company paid life insurance. You can get a $25,000 policy in most states that's term life insurance for about $6 to $10 a month per employee per person that has it, right? So it's not a huge cost, but it's another benefit that you can offer to your employees besides the vehicle or the cell phone and those kind of things.
I agree. One thing you said is so true. This is one thing people should say. If a guy has benefits at another company, he's not coming to your company without benefits. You can, that's going to happen like a needle in a haystack. They're not going to do it. People think it's so expensive. It's not. It's a car payment. You get it. So I do the same thing Chris does. I do benefits. They drive the company vehicle home. Yeah, if they're going out to the store, it's not like it's on my truck and gas. It's not a big deal. I give them a per diem when they travel. People love that. $36. They feel like they're getting over on me because they're eating food on the road. You know, I'm happy to give them $36. I have one guy who's like, I don't even spend it. I just stack it, Kev. That's good. I can do this. Do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Go ahead. But the other part is we've all seen people who they want to start their own company or do anything, and they'll use benefits as a reason they don't do it. That's how important it is. I know so many people, I would do it, but I need the benefits. And in my mind, I'm thinking, you're not going to live your dream because of a $500 a month package. But the truth is they will not leave. So why not figure out how to make them happy? You give them a benefits, you give them opportunity. Most people don't want to go run their company and be a psycho at night like we are, stressing out about payroll and everything. They look at us like, why? These guys are idiots. What are they? How much? This sounds like it's horrible. They want to go home, be with their family, have benefits. They get sick, they're okay. Give it to them, the package, give them opportunity, and you can get A players.
That's right. And they'll stay with you a long time too.
Yeah, Scott, it was so great having you on. Just want to say this, you're a perfect example of this. Chris, you probably feel like this. When we did this, I was really thinking about content for the guys in the group, but I end up learning so much. It's
Absolutely.
like, this is what happens every time. That's why we always we went over an hour. I'm thinking, we'll do like 30 minutes with Scott. Next thing you know, I'm hitting you with all those questions. I forget I'm even on this platform. It's like a one-on-one Zoom. So
that's the HR person. Yeah, Scott, sorry I went over.
If you can put in the comments all your contact info, people can call you, hire you as a consultant and all your packages. You can go over that with them one-on-one. You've done it for several people who actually became members of this group. Chris is one of them. So I know Scott for a long time. You guys can all see how knowledgeable he is. But this is a way to take your company to the next level. You got to get outside people, high-level people to help you.
And real quick, just a quick testimony before we kill this, is Scott was an amazing benefit to come in. And, you know, he mentioned at the beginning that a lot of people say he's not just HR, he is business coaching. And I agree 100% with that statement. And to give you a snapshot analysis of what it looks like, and hopefully, Scott, you still actually do at business meetings and not just Zoom.
I prefer that. I prefer that. I hate Zoom.
Okay.
So I'm a people person. So
he came down. He flew down to Tupelo, Mississippi. He stayed at my facility. Got a hotel room. Showed up at my facility for several days. He interviewed my employees and he interviewed me and Christy as owners after the employees. He just got an idea of what we're looking for, where we're wanting to go. He helped us create culture, core values, told us what we were doing good, told us what we could do better. And then when he gets back home, he sits here and does all of this homework and sends you all of these paperworks with your logo, your branding, everything. So now you can start trying to implement. And then he'll sit there and just handhold you with calls as you have questions along the path. And he did it with ours. We had, we appreciated it, had pulled a lot of things that helped us move forward. And then I know personally within the Legacy family, there's a trucking company, and I've seen them just blow up in scalability and in revenue. And Scott, you've been holding their hand and they sing your praises every time I get around them. So thank you for coming on for free, spending over an hour of your time, dropping the jewels to our viewers. Yeah, it's been huge.
Yeah, incredible info. Reach out to him. Scott, I'm going to reach out to you about me and Sean Stapler are looking to buy this roofing business in Cleveland. They have a small team on. I didn't know you were doing all that with mergers and acquisitions. That sounds incredible. So I'm going to reach out to you about that.
I just helped that same client, that trucking company. We just bought a company in March this year, and they doubled their employees and the volume of work. So like I helped with all the leading of the due diligence and those things. That's a lot of fun for me.
Like it.
And I just want to say thank you to Kevin for having me on, and Chris as well. And Chris, thank you for the testimony. I definitely appreciate that. I just want to help people. I mean, HR is fun, but seeing a business owner be able to grow and get their time back, put right people in the right seats, that's what life's about. And then being able to have financially more to be able to give back and do more for people in your community or your family. That's what this is all about, and your team members.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks so much for coming on. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.